Hi, my name is Chris Williams, and I'm in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the 2022 fall reporting in with regards to data review. So let's begin. Now, our agenda today, we're going to talk about why do we do data review. We're going to understand some of the process to it. I'll give you some tentative timelines for reporting, and then we'll talk about what are our priorities for data review, as well as some features of Sdrr and steps. And we'll also get into cohort and also our post-secondary readiness. And then at the end, give you some resources and our contact information to be able to assist you with the data review process. So let's get into why do we need data review? Of course, data review is our last opportunity to be able to review, for you to be able to review and verify your data before it's publicly released in the school report card. Should be a short and focused review of your access and your alternate access students. It should also with your Kentucky Summative Assessment, which is KSA, and our alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment, which is AKSA. And then post-secondary readiness, it scores, and then your cohort data for 4-year and 5-year. And the reason I say this should be short and focused is because, we do have rosters that we've been doing throughout the year. And we'll, on the next slide, we'll review that and the timelines that we had for those particular times that rosters were open. And then, like I said, we want our school and district staff to concentrate on the reopening of their schools because we know you're going back to school, and that is a busy time for you. But, we do want to give you one more opportunity at the DAC level for our district assessment coordinators and also for our building assessment coordinators, our BACs, to be able to look at their demographic data for their students one more last time before it's publicly reported in our school report card. So let's get into understanding the process and why we do this. The one thing we do want to just always iterate is that, we do have to get our rosters right. And, we had access and our alternate access window opened back up in January, February time. But our rosters opened up around the 1st of January, and they went through March to be able for you to be able to go in and add any non-participations for our students at that particular time. And then when that closed in March, then we opened those rosters back up along with the spring rosters, and that was for, our AKSA, our KSA, also for access, alternate access, for our post-secondary readiness. And then we also had cohort 2 open as well from February to July. So our spring rosters, which what I just discussed, was open from April till June. It closed on June 15th. That was the last time that you could make any changes to our rosters for the spring. And then you were to download those rosters as well as the student listings, and then your transfer listings if you had any students who, transferred in or out of your district for your 100-day accountability, and then also your change listings that you, if you made any changes to your students, either their demographics, their accommodate within the demographics, if you filed any non-participations, changed accountability, or requested, if you went in and requested any accommodations for our IEP or our program services plan students. And that would be for our program services students, that would be our EL students. Then once those close, then we move into our next process, and that is our data review and cleanup. And this is what we're going to go into. And we always usually open this up in August. Our data review process for this will start August the 11th, and it'll go through the 19th. And when we close on the 19th, that will be at noon for new tickets. And then any new tickets that you've got in, you want to make sure that those are all of your tickets are taken care of before it closes for you on the 19th. Then during this time, you'll be able to make, like I said, make changes to your individual student level data, request any non-participations, and we'll talk about non-participations and show you a couple of examples of non-participations, how to file those non-participations, how to upload those into Sdrr. For you. And then we'll also talk about how to request accountability changes, what's that's going to look like for your 100-day students, because we do have accountability this year. And so we hadn't had accountability since 2019. So I always like to review this process, because even though you may be a seasoned ACT, we always have new district assessment coordinators and also new building assessment coordinators that are new to the district. So always try to go over the processes, just kind of assist you with this. And then once this data review is over with on the 19th of August, then we do have Quality Control Day, which is our QC day for our district assessment coordinators. And that will we'll have some timelines for that. And then we'll get into, once that particular process is done, then we'll move into the school report card for reporting, and that's where we'll have our accurate reporting of our data. All of our data will go into the school report card. And then once the school report card is released, we always do a 10-day regulatory data review that follows public release. And keep in mind that even though you make changes after that, that is after in Sdrr for that 10-day regulatory data review after public release, that is after public release. And so we do give you another opportunity, but it's not to clean up your data, but it's not until after public release. So we like you to do, and we're one of the few states who allows districts one more time to clean up their data before it's accurately reported in the school report card. So just kind of give you a little bit of background information about that. So now let's look into these tentative timelines for fall reporting. Of course, I've went over the data review and then when it's going to close and what its focus is. Then we go into the quality control day. That is our last time to go in. That'll open tentatively September 22nd. And that follows our data review process of August 11th through the 19th. So then when that QC day opens up, that's for our district assessment coordinators to be able to go in and look for big systemic issues. Are you missing, your free or reduced lunch students? Are you missing in particular demographic groups? Are you, for example, are you missing, all your females, etc. too? That is a big systemic issues. So once we get to QC day on September 22nd, those are not for individual student changes. That has to be done August 11th through the 19th, not on September 22nd. You'll have spreadsheets just like you do for data review. You'll have to go into the KD Applications login, Web Applications login, to be able to download those spreadsheets just like you do for data review, and be able to log in and see that. And that's the same where you log in for Sdrr is the same process where you will log in to get to your spreadsheets. Those will be under student data detail, and we'll talk about those in just a few minutes when we get to spreadsheets. Also for QC Day, you'll have the Google form. There will be a Google form that will be sent out with the communication in a Monday Deck email that will have all the details for all of these tentative timelines that I'm talking about right now on the slide. It'll have, what the file names will be, to download the spreadsheets. It'll have where to log in to the web applications login. And also it'll have a link to the Google form for you to fill out, because there will be steps for you to do, as a district assessment coordinator for QC Day to be looking at your data. And then also there will be a discrepancy form too for that particular day of QC Day for you to put any big systemic issues. And keep in mind, I'm going to remind you one more time, for QC Day, that's only for big systemic issues, not for individual student changes. Data review is what that's for. And then we'll get down to the, once we finished up QC Day on the 22nd, then we'll get ready for our media release and, our embargo data, until it is always embargoed until public release. So, we caution you on who you share your data with in your districts. And also for QC Day, we also have non-disclosure forms that will have you'll have to fill those out prior to QC Day and submit those to us before you'll be able to see your data in the web applications login. So those are important things that I want you to know. And then once that QC Day is over with, then we get into the media release, and that'll be like late September, early October. We'll have more exact dates closer to time. And then, like I said, data is always embargoed until public release. So you do not want to, be having any public meetings, either with your board or with any of, do not have any public meetings at school, to be talking about the data. Because like I said, it is embargoed until public release. And then we move into public release. And also during that time is, that we release it to our schools and districts in late September, early October. We also, the day before it's released in the public record, usually in the public, for public release in the school report card, that we release it to the media, to get them ready for their articles and things like that for that to happen. And you'll want to make sure all of that, data stays embargoed until early October, when we will release it for public. And that'll be in our school report card, and we'll have exact dates that will be coming for that. And then, like I said, just a reminder about that 10-day regulatory data review after public release in Sdrr. But that'll be after if the scores are already public released, that if you did not get your changes in during data review, that we do hold that regulatory data review after public release. But keep it in mind, it's already after everything is already out there to the public and been shared. So, do go in and make a valiant effort during data review, August 11th through the 19th, to make those changes to demographics accountability and non-participations. And that should be your focus for that particular data review that's coming up soon. Now, what am I going to do? My priorities. What are my priorities for data review? Okay, so your step one, your number one priority is to look at all of your demographics of your students. And then also look at the accountability, make sure that the accountability is where it's supposed to. If it's supposed to be, if those students are 100 days to you, or if they're 100 days to another district, or they are, 100 days, if, you want to make sure that you check that accountability. And also, if the student hadn't been 100 days anywhere, that if it goes to the state, then that is reflected underneath accountability when you look at your student listing for your and also all the other demographics for your students. And then what I want you to do is always for all the demographics, because I just want to review this, because we do have new district assessment coordinators, and we do have new building assessment coordinators, when they're reviewing the data, when they're reviewing the demographics in Sdrr. So that will be based off of your first day of your 14-day testing window. All demographics are that way in Sdrr. So you should see, any changes that you made back in the spring, those should be reflected during data review. Also, any non-participations that you filed in the spring during that spring roster phase of April through June, any demographic changes that you made, you were to make those for rosters back in the spring, you were to make those in Infinite Campus, and then those were reflected in the Sdrr. Now, for data review, you'll be able to go in and that is one of the differences between rosters and data review. Data review, you're able to click right on to the demographics and be able to make those changes. But I do want you to, if you make any changes to your demographics in Sdrr, that you also go back and make sure that Infinite Campus is also updated. So that way, all of that information is always current. And then you always want to check, the lunch status and your students who have disability status, for your IEP students, since these have potential to change over time. Also, you want to confirm your ethnicity and your race category, because that's going to be very important for when it comes to QC day and looking at your scores. You also want to check, your accommodations. Make sure that for your IEP and for your PSP students that you have checked if they had accommodations during any of our state required testing for access, alternate access, KSA, alternate KSA. That you mark those particular accommodations for those students if they received accommodations on any of our state required assessments that I just mentioned. Also, you want to make sure if that you indicate the correct accountability for your students that contribute to your school or your district accountability, and those who do not. Always double check that. That's going to be an important thing. And always, if you've got to file any non-participations, that you make sure, because remember, when you file non-participations or accountability changes, that, those do have to go through approval from our Office of Assessment and Accountability. And so you always want to make sure that those are all resolved before the window closes for data review. Also, another thing that's important for you in your district is to check your participation of your students. check the participation status of your students on those spreadsheets. And that you're going to download underneath student data detail, underneath the web applications that's on the KDU website. So when you log into Sdrr as a district assessment coordinator, you will, only our district assessment coordinators will be able to download the spreadsheets under student data detail. And that's the KD web applications login is the same place where you log in with your, your Microsoft login. If you're logged into Microsoft, you'll be able to click on that and get to both, as a district assessment coordinator, get to the spreadsheets to download and be looking at the participation status of your students. And then you'll also get to, and then you'll also be able to log in with that same application to get to Sdrr as well. So that's an important piece. And if you do not have, as a new district assessment coordinator, or if you're building assessment coordinator, if you do not have those credentials, or if you were a DAC or a BAC last year and something happened and you don't have access to that, to Sdrr, you want to get with your WAPOC, which is your web applications point of contact, who will be able to, that's just a fancy name for your district technology person in your district. You want to get to them, and before Sdrr opens on August the 11th. And make sure that you do have access to those. As a district assessment coordinator, you would need access to the student data detail and to Sdrr. And as a building assessment coordinator, you would only need access to your particular school for Sdrr. Now, let's talk about other things that you're going to do with this process, and just kind of review the data review process. So first thing is you're going to make sure that you have access to the secure web applications login and from your WAPOC. And you, as a district assessment coordinator, will only be able to download the spreadsheets underneath student data detail for your for all your schools and districts, and be able to see that information as a DAC. Your BACs will not be able to do that. And then both of you, as a DAC and BAC, will need to make sure you have access. As a DAC, you will have access as a district level user, and you'll be able to see all your schools in the district and their information in Sdrr, where the BACs will only see their particular school demographic information and be able to check accountability and file any non-participation during this time. Also, now, why do I have TEDs in there? Because one of the things that we're going to be looking at that we did not look back in spring rosters, because we had post-secondary readiness that was back in spring rosters, but we didn't have the scores for you. And that will be the only thing you will see scores for in Sdrr or on these spreadsheets. Excuse me, not on the spreadsheets. You'll just see the participation status, whether the student, tested or not. But then in Sdrr, you'll be able to see your post-secondary readiness scores, and that's for that academic portion only. You'll be able to see those scores and be able to make any changes for your for Sdrr. You'll have to go back to Sdrr and be able to see that for post-secondary readiness scores. And for post-secondary readiness demographics, you'll see that during data review. And so we'll kind of review over that again. But then, you know, for post-secondary readiness, you know, we have two aspects. We have the academic part of post-secondary readiness. That's what you're going to see in Sdrr. And then we also have the post-secondary readiness for career data. Now, your career data, you have to make any changes to that in TEDS. And so you have to go to a different office, you know, the Office of Career Technical Education, to be able to talk with them about your TEDS data for career data. So I always try to let you know what you're going to do in Sdrr, what you're going to do on the web applications login, and what you're going to do in TEDS, because this is all an important process of the, you know, of this process when we do data review, to know where do I go and how do I get into it, and who should be into it. Now, let's talk about the data. Like I said, we'll talk about the data that's going to be available in Sdrr. So, of course, we took your roster data. It has been loaded and matched with what we got from our test vendors. And you know that for some of you, if you're new, you probably won't know this information, but let's just review it for you. For access and alternate access, that always comes from DRC, which is Data Recognition Corporation. And that's always in WIDA AMS, which is the WIDA Assessment Management System. And we belong, and that they are a subcontract of WIDA, DRC is. And so WIDA is the consortium we belong to, which is the World Class Instructional Design and Assessment. And then that always produces our EL data, our English learner data, for both access, alternate access, etc. Then we also have, you know, our ACT, who is our contract for our ACT data. We also have for KSA, you know, we have the data that comes from Pearson. And, you know, that is, you know, usually you can, you get that always from our Pearson contract. And then also we have, you know, like I said, our ACT data, even though it is also in the same system as, you know, is under, well, excuse me, underneath, you know, it is in Pearson Access Next, which is PAN. And there's two different logins, even though Pearson is our contract for you know, for our Kentucky Summative Assessment, that, you know, the ACT, you'll be able to look at test sessions and stuff like that through Pearson Access Next. And through that system. So just want to kind of remind you of that. And then also, you know, we have UK, who is our vendor for our alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment. And that's for our transition attainment record, also our attainment task. And you know, that system is always put in the student registration database. That's where you find your scores for that information. So I just wanted to kind of go over those particular contracts and those particular systems, so you know where the data is coming from. And once we get those data from our vendors, we always get files sent to us from OAA. And our data division does a wonderful job of, I'm telling you, phenomenal job, let me just tell you, of looking at our data and getting that all matched up from our vendors, getting that also, you know, ready for into you know, Sdrr for you, also into those spreadsheets for you. So just want to kind of give them just a shout out, you know, because they do a phenomenal job with that. And that is, you know, Kevin Hill's group with his staff with John Wickheiser and Mike Prater, and also, all of the other data division as well. And so just want to give them a shout out for all the work they do for getting that information, from your rosters into data review, and also matching all that vendor data. And of course, if a student response booklet was submitted for a student to the vendor, or the student tested online and the student was not on your roster, then the student was added to the roster by Katie, by our office. And of course, rosters must match, the vendor information as well. And so changes that were made during the roster on that last day on June 15th are reflected in data review. And like I said, data review is your last opportunity to review and verify student data before it goes to QC day. And then, of course, no scores are going to be in Sdrr except the academic readiness for post-secondary readiness. And when you get to post-secondary readiness, there's going to be two things you want to look at for that. You want to look at all the demographics in the data review part of Sdrr, and then you also want to look at the post-secondary readiness scores. And I'll show you what some of those screenshots are going to look like. You'll change the scores underneath, or update any of the scores in the post-secondary readiness score section. And then, like I said, anything that you're going to need changes for your 4- and 5-year cohort will also be in Sdrr. So you'll see those particular 3 tabs as you when you log in, and we have screenshots to show you that when we get to Sdrr and the functions of it. Now, so here's some suggested steps for you, because people always like, well, what do I do? Well, in Sdrr, you're going to make, your demographic and your 100-day changes. You're going to request your non-participations. You're also going to make changes in Sdrr for academic readiness data for post-secondary readiness and cohort if needed. And then the next thing is for the Katie applications login. You're going to download those spreadsheets from the application site. And then you'll filter to identify any students who may need resolution. And then also the third step is to also look for TEDS, and where you're going to find TEDS data. Well, that system you'll have to you'll contact the Office of Career and Technical Education for career data changes to your post-secondary readiness. So those are your kind of suggested steps. Then let's talk about those spreadsheets and the participation rates. That's only based off of assessment data only for participation rates, whether your student participated or not. Students who did not attempt the test or have an approved non-participation, whether you were in person or virtual this year, will be reflected in a low participation rate in the summary spreadsheets, regardless of like I said, your instructional type. And then also to meet federal participation rates, that lowest score is applied to the school reports for students who did not test. Therefore, your aggregate performance for schools and districts and your state is based on the scores of who attempted to test and did not have an approved non-participation. And it's who you tested or attempted to test at that particular location. It's not your 100-day students. And of course, a reminder for KSA and alternate KSA, participation rates will be by content areas, and they will be reported by each content area of reading, mathematics, science, and writing for the school as a whole and the student demographic groups. And another thing is sometimes people forget about our English learners because, you know, back in during the spring, when KSA opened, Kentucky Summative Assessment opened, that our ELs, our first year EL students did participate in mathematics and science only in the grade levels that were assessed. And for that would have been for mathematics, that would have been for grades 3 through 8. And then for our grades 10, and our high school students. And then we would have also had our science, which would have been for grades 4, 7, and 11. So that would have been elementary, middle, and your high school. They participated in if they were assigned those particular grade levels. So I always want to, and for mathematics, it would have been grade, 11 for your for science, and then for mathematics it would have been like I said, the 3 through 8, and then our grade 10. So just want to kind of reiterate that particular part of it for you, that even though, you know, they count towards your participation rate in you know, even though, because they were assessed in those particular content areas, but they will not be included in your accountability. And so you had to go in and mark them as a first year EL on your rosters. And if you didn't do that during the spring, you still have one more opportunity to mark your first year EL students during data review. Now, some people get, the students, you know, how they're included for novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, you know, with assessment data and I guess with accountability. Of course, when it comes to, you know, assigning a novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, you know, those, the reason that, you know, we will not see that particular thing at this point during data review, that will come later, is because we had a standard setting that we had to do for our content areas that we had to do this summer. And then also we had to create cut scores for novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished for those cut scores. And so that data will come later. And so, but I just want to kind of go over the comparisons, you know, of what this is going to be, because like for assessment data, that always has to be where the students were tested, the tested locations, and those are all your students that tested or attempted to test without an approved non-participation at the school are reported at that testing location. Where for accountability, it's where your students, you know, were for 100 days. And that may have not been the same place where they were tested at the tested location. And so for accountability, it's your 100-day entity. Those are all students who do not have an approved, non-participation. This includes students that did not attempt the test. They are assigned the lowest score of novice for reporting purposes. So just kind of want to go over that particular piece of it. Remember, that those cuts and that data will come later in the process. Now, let's look at how are we going to get logged in and start the data review process. First thing is that, as I said, you always want to get with your WAPOC, which is your Web Applications Point of Contact. They are the ones who will be granting you access as a district assessment coordinator and also as a building assessment coordinator to look at your demographics for your student and get to the student listings for your students. So when you do that, once you get logged in, like I said, you'll go to the right-hand side and you'll sign in with, make sure that you're already signed in to Microsoft. Sign in and you'll click to get to Sdrr if you are a building assessment coordinator or a DAC. District Assessment Coordinator, you'll be able to get into that with that same login. And then as a District Assessment Coordinator, you'll also be able to get into the same place, sign in with Microsoft to be able to get to the student data detail to be able to download your spreadsheets. Also, I have a link here that gets you to the KDE, on the KDE website to this applications login site. And then once you get logged in, this is the welcome and home screen. You're going to see the latest announcements. You'll see a box with the latest announcements. It'll talk about, the timelines for, for data review. It'll also talk about, your post-secondary readiness. Also, it'll talk about cohort. And then it'll say, of course, your it'll have for assistance, you'll go to the I need help. That's that big I need help button, red button that's always on the screen. That'll get you to lots of information about assessments, and we'll talk about that and show you a screenshot of what that looks like. But that's going to be another important resource for you during the data review process. And then you also have the Sandbox, and that's a Sandbox version of Sdrr. You always want to do your trainings, for your schools in the Sandbox version. You never want to do any trainings during the live version, and it'll always say Sandbox to let you know that you are in that particular training session for Sdrr, and it'll have that up. That'll have that right on the screen for you, so you would know. And that's where you can also get yourself familiar in the Sandbox with the with demographics. Playing around with with your students, if you, for filing, trying to see how do I file, non-participations, how do I change, the demographics, etc. And then also accommodations. So that Sandbox is for you, but I do want to caution you, if you are a district assessment coordinator and you're doing trainings for Sandbox, you only want to train, your because that is, that has, students in there, for particular schools. And so if you're training the whole district, you don't want to do that with Sandbox, because you should be training individual schools with Sandbox, because that's only their data only, and you don't want other schools to see other data, their other schools' data. So when you're looking at Sandbox, so that's a caution we always want to, when you as a district assessment coordinator are training the district, do not train on that student level data, because you don't want other schools to be able to see other schools' data, and because remember what I said with the level access. As a DAC, you can see every school and within your district and be able to make any changes. But as a BAC, they can only see their particular school data, and with their demographic information and accountability, etc. Another important thing in the latest announcements is you've got the 100-day tool to help you with accountability. Also, there's a 100-day quiz to test your knowledge to see and like I said, that 100-day quiz is anonymous. And that's gonna let you test some 100-day scenarios to see if you are good with the 100-day, making sure that you are doing that correct, because that is going to be an important piece. And as I would say with the 100-day information, you always want to, as a DAC, do unto, it's like the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. You always want to be nice to other district assessment coordinators when you're transferring accountability back to another district. Make sure it is going to that right district. And there are things, in Infinite Campus reports you can run for your 100 days to be able to see that and where those students go to. And then when it comes to cohort, you also have a cohort tool that'll help you assist you with cohort for your 4-year and 5-year cohort students for your graduation data. Now, as you can see, once you see the announcements, those are going to be important for you to look at, but also important to look at is going to be these 3 areas. You're going to see cohort. It'll have when it's open, it'll be green, and it'll show you when data review opens, it'll show you cohort that's open. It'll have your student listings, ticket listings, transfer listings, and being able to download all of your information before it closes. Also, you'll get into data review, and it'll have all of your student listings that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. It'll have your ticket listing, transfer listing, and be able to download all of this information before it closes. And then you'll also see the third thing that you want to always look at is your secondary readiness scores. And this is new because remember, we hadn't had this since 2019. So, some things we may have forgotten about that. So we'll go over this particular information and give you some screenshots and some details about all of these things when it comes to Sdrr. And remember that, you have 2 buttons. You have one that is open that'll tell you what is opened, and then you also have closed. And if you click on the closed, you'll be able to see your rosters and that were open, for both access and alternate access back in January and that Fed January through March. Those rosters to just do the non-participations only. You can also see if you click on the close to be able to get to your spring rosters, and if you can't locate those spring if you're a new DAC or a new DAC and you didn't, or a BAC, and you didn't download those student listings and things and your changes and stuff like that you made as a BAC for your schools or as a DAC for your whole entire schools in your district, you can still get to those underneath that closed button. You click on that in Sdrr, and you could do that now. Go in there and be able to download, your changes that you made to your tickets, your student listing changes that you made. You'll be able to download underneath that download button. Now, you won't be able to make any changes to any of your rosters that were closed back in the spring, or access or alternate access back in the January through March window, but you'll be able to download those changes you made during that time. And then, like I said, that's an important thing when it comes to data review, is to make sure that those changes that you made back in the spring are reflected during that data review. And then once you click on those, you click on data review, it'll take you down to data review. If you click on the cohort, it takes you to cohort section. If you click on post-secondary readiness, it'll take you to those scores. It'll take you directly to those particular scores so you can start looking at those. And remember, the only place you're going to see scores is in Sdrr, is underneath this post-secondary readiness. Now that I clicked on that data review, what am I going to see here? Well, I'm going to see the Sdrr task list. And this is going to be important, because some people say, well, what am I going to be doing? Do we have a set of tasks? We do. This is optional. You can click these as you're going through your data review to make sure that you've got everything done. And of course, it tells you at the bottom, always before data review closes, is to make sure that you have exported copies, downloaded copies of those. You can export those to an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file, to be able to download your student listings, your change listings, and store those. You always want to make sure you store those securely in your district. And then you'll have quick links. Quick links get you to all your student listings. And then you also have your tickets. Tickets are going to be very important that you always keep apprised of. And so let's go into each one of these. So when you get to your Sdrr task list, you can check these boxes. And the ones that, and keep in mind, if you've checked them, they will stay checked for you when you log in again to Sdrr. And the ones that are blank are the ones that need to be completed. But like I said, this is optional. This just kind of helps you go through what you're going to be doing. Like, did you mark students who were enrolled in the window but did not take the assessment as non-participation? Did you file those? Did you check all your demographic groups? Demographic information. Did you go back and make sure that, that the information in the non-participation matches what's in Infinite Campus, that you did mark accommodations if a student had accommodations on any of our state required assessments, that there's a yes for the IEP and also for the EL status before you can mark the accommodations as yes or no. And then that's an important piece when it comes to data review. Also, any tickets that you've put in, that you always note the ones that are denied or updated that need further action. And we'll talk about those when we get to the tickets. And then, like I said, any tickets that are marked updated by OEA that you've went in and provided us additional information for that. And then you go, and then always at the end to be able to export those, the changes that you made, and then if you didn't have to make any changes, that you still make a copy of those and keep those securely in your district. Now, the next part of that, how am I going to get to my student listings during data review? Well, the first one here, you're going to get to it underneath quick links. When you look at quick links, you're going to see all of your student listings if you want to see them all at one time, or you can go through and click on each one that you want to work on, whether you want to work on access, alternate access, AKA SA, KSA, or post-secondary readiness. You can go through and look at those individually, or you can see them all during the student listing and see everything at one time. However you want to view it is up to you. Also, you want to look at your transfer listing always, because that shows who you transfer, your accountability to other districts, and who they have transferred, students to you. So you want to make sure you look at that transfer listing as well. And then, like I said, always download everything before it closes, because that's going to be an important piece. When it comes to also looking at the next process, which is QC day. Tickets. Now let's talk about our tickets. Because any changes you make, you're putting in a ticket. You know, it always keeps you a total of all tickets that have submitted for your district. Also, it tells you new ones that, you know, we have, you know, need to be looking at or that you've submitted. Also, you have the updated more information. Always look at those because that means we're asking you for more information, you know, from that. That you need to update and give that before we can, because like I said, you know, when it comes to accountability or for non-participations of medical, etc., you know, those have to be approved. And you know, through our office, and so it's we do sometimes, if you didn't put all of the information in there for us at the beginning, and that's an important thing is when you're putting in non-participations that you always put in those as much detail as possible. And then always look at your denied tickets because, you know, there are times where we'll deny a ticket and it's not just because we want to deny a ticket. It means that, you know, we denied it for a certain reason. Maybe you filed, you know, the wrong non-participation or whatever. And so, you know, that, you know, and we always tell you why we deny it. And if you need to go in and submit a new ticket, and we tell you what to do with that. But remember, none of your denied tickets will ever go away. They'll still be denied, even though you may have requested a new ticket for that student. And then closed means it's closed. There's nothing else for you to do. Approved means those were already approved. Pending means you're waiting on, you know, OAA to go over those and give you and tell you whether they're approved or denied. And so that kind of goes over our tickets. Very important that you look at all your student listings for your students, their demographic information, their accountability, and also their accommodations. And then update any of that information. And if you make any changes to your student listings, those are what we call tickets. And so that's why I say it's very important to keep up with your tickets. Make sure that before it closes that all of your tickets are done and there's none that is more information from you, that we need more information from you, or that you're waiting on us to approve. Now, features of Sdrr. You're going to be able to search and filter by lots of information. By accountability, you know, you can look at the different types of accountability, even those students who are not, accountable to you. You'll be able to filter by that underneath the accountability. You'll also be able to filter by first name, last name, you know, birth date, and then also you can do IEP status, you know, EL status, you know, accommodations by non-participations. You'll be able to do that. You'll also be able to see the ticket history for each student, and those go back 3 years. And so you'll be able to see the any ticket history for your students and for the past 3 years. And be able to see that on your student listings. You'll be able to edit most of the demographic fields during data review. There'll be a few that you cannot, and one of those is tested school. You cannot, you know, edit the tested school for those. You know, if there is something wrong to tested school for that demographic field, then you have to send an email to our data vision, which is kdassessment@education.ky.gov, and they would have to look at the tested school location. There's hyperlinks to the student listings, the tickets, the transfer listings, and to the download that you can click on, go straight to those. And you saw those on our first screen, and I'll go back and show you that particular piece, and then we'll come back to 18. So from the home page, like I said, those are all hyperlinked for you right here, and you go straight into those. Now let's move back to our 18 where we were. And then let's also upload form documentation for any medical non-participations. You always want to upload those. So you'll have to fill out the forms from the KDE website on the forms page. Go to it. When you get to the forms page, you'll see the medical non-participations if you need to upload any of those, if you forgot one back in the spring. Or if you're looking at your participation statuses, you'll see, hey, why was this kid not tested? Do you want to make sure that there was a non-participation reason why that kid didn't get tested? A valid non-participation reason. And one of those could be medical. And we'll talk about the non-participations for different things. We'll show you some screenshots of those and how to do this process. But we always want to make sure that you do go on the forms page, that you have that filled out completely, and then you would scan that document to your computer. And then once you get into Sdrr, it'll actually ask you to locate that where you have it scanned on your computer to be able to upload that document to us. Now, let's look at our student listings. You know, I talked about filtering, and this is what you can filter by. This is what I was going by. You can filter by SSID number, last name, first name, district, school, 100-day, you know, and whether they're 100 days to you or not 100 days. You know, your 100-day students who are not 100 days, you'll be able to see that underneath that, you know, tested, but maybe not 100 days for you, or tested and 100 days to you. You'll be able to filter by that underneath that 100-day filter. Also, test types, and that's all of our test types. If you want to filter by, you know, access, you know, if you're looking at all of your you know, student listings, you can filter this way too, to get to just access or alternate access, or just get to KSA or your alternate KSA or your post-secondary readiness. So, you know, you can filter by all those test types. You can also filter by accommodations, participation status. That's what I was talking about, you know, whether, you know, your non-participation status, you can see all of those. Grade level, your grade levels of your students, if you want to look at, so, you know, each grade level at a time. The lunch status, you know, free or reduced lunch status, or they're not free and reduced lunch. Their paid status, you can see all that and filter that, and your IEP and your EL status, you can filter those. And then when you get to your student listings, you're going to see the test type over to, now if you selected all your student listings, you'll see every test type in the students there. And remember that when you look at all of them, you'll see all the tests that they participated in. And you know, some of our students participate in multiple assessments. And so don't get alarmed when you see a kid who is the same kid who may be there for you know, for KSA, and then also see them for access, you know, because our English learners do take, you know, KSA, and they also could be in there for post-secondary readiness, and they could also be in there for, you know, you know, alternate assessment if they participate in that particular assessment. So, you know, a lot of your students may have, you know, be in there for multiple tests, depending on what grade level are and what assessments are assessed at that grade level. And so, and that really gets into, you know, into play. So don't be deleting those, thinking, why is my kid on there twice? Well, look at their test type, because they could be in there they're in there for 2 different assessments. And then you also have, the name of the student, you'll have the grade level, you'll have the SSID number of the students, the date of birth, gender, race and ethnicity, 100-day entity that, your 100-day students. You'll see where the students were tested, the testing school, whether it was yours or somewhere else in another district. You'll also see the non-part. Any non-participations that you've already got approved will be right here in this column. And like I said, if a student tested, they would not have a non-participation here. It's for students that, do not have a non-participation rate. If they were not tested, then they should have a valid non-participation, whether it be the student was for like KSA, what was the student a first year EL? Was the student, withdrew during the testing window, after the testing window began, which that would be during the testing window. Those are non-participation reasons, and we have lots of them, and those non-participations are by test. They change, and we'll look at some examples of the changes to those. You want to look at your lunch status of your students. You always want to look at your IEP students and whether they have to have a yes in that column. You want them to have that yes. If there's not a yes and they had an IEP, you want to make sure you change that to a yes and then mark accommodations that were given on the assessments. Also, our ELs, they participate on more than just access and alternate access. And so they have to participate in KSA too. And so you want to see and remember for our ELs, for you to mark it for KSA, that had to be, marked in Infinite Campus underneath that EL tab for our content assessments. And for ELs for access, the only way they could have accommodations on access is if they had an IEP or a 504 plan. And so, there's significant rules around each of our accommodations. So and around our tests. So be familiar of what, accommodations were given. And like our post-secondary readiness, we do have accommodations that you were given for ACT that had to be approved by ACT to be able to get a college reportable score and be part, and for post-secondary readiness. So, and that's our post-secondary readiness is for our 12th graders, where KSA is for our grades 3 through 8, and then, 10 and 11. And then we have access, that is for K through 12, and our alternate access is K through 12. And so see our grade levels change and with each assessment, and you need to make sure you know the rules around those assessments as well, because it's going to be very important when you're changing the demographics right here. And then like for if a student who took ACT, those were for our for our 11th grade, and of course, we have to we benchmark the, if they pass the benchmarks in any of the areas, we bench, then for any of those post-secondary readiness, especially for ACT, we would we always make sure to save those scores so that way when it comes to post-secondary readiness, that you'll be able to see those during the post-secondary readiness scores. But on the student listings for data review, you'll just see the demographic information. The scores are in another tab that I showed you at the beginning. And it'll be under post-secondary readiness scores. That's the only place you're going to see scores. And then, like I said, you'll be able to export this information to an Excel and be able to manipulate that information. But remember that if you export it to an Excel or a PDF or a CSV file, that any changes you made to your export, exporting those out, you have to go into Sdrr and make those changes on the student listings. And then that's the same thing, when you look at your participation status, spreadsheets that you'll see underneath student data detail. You can't make any changes to it on the spreadsheet. You have to go into Sdrr and make those on the student listings. So it's very important that you make all changes on the student listing. And all you have to do is click onto that find that student on your student listing, click on the field that needs to be updated. If it doesn't need to be updated, just leave it alone. Because if it's correct, then that means less work you've got to do. And, if you did a lot of work back at spring rosters during that April through June, that means less work you got to do during data review for both DACs and BACs. And then remember when I said that you can also see your ticket history, you'll be able to click on tickets and be able to see that information at this particular time. And remember, those go back 3 years, and you can see the ticket history on that particular student. So I think that takes care of all the student listings, and here's where you'll be able to change accountability. So you'll be able to, find the student on the student listing, go to the 100-day entity column for that student, double click right there in that column. And if you've got to change a 100-day status, that you make sure that you put in where that student goes exactly. Don't be guessing, and don't try to just say, well, I'll just send it to here. Always double check and make sure you're sending it to the correct, school or district for that 100-day entity. Because remember what I said about the 100-day rule? That 100-day golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So you want to play nice and do that particular piece there. And when you click on that, it'll ask you, where you want the accountability to go to. And there'll be a box that'll explain where you'll have to explain how many days. We don't want the range of, the date range. We want how many days the student was enrolled with you. If they're not 100, if they shouldn't be accountable to you. And then you always want to make sure that you look at, if you're filing non-participations, you double click on the dash. And it'll give you a drop down of the non-participations, and you select the non-participation that is appropriate for that student. So that's where that, those spreadsheets are gonna, that you had to, as a DAC, you're gonna download off of the web applications, web secure applications login, that underneath that student data detail. When you look at those spreadsheets, your participation for your students, if you need to file any non-participations, you want to do that here. But remember, if you tested a kid, and there's not a valid non-participation, of course, the lowest score will be, sent to those, because there wasn't a valid non-participation of, whether it been a medical or a withdrew or expelled without services or etc. But if it is one of those, if it is a valid one and you know that student and you forgot to do it during rosters, this is your last opportunity to be able to request those non-participations is right now. And to change that 100-day and get all of this demographic information correct, all of these fields. And you will change it right during data review. Remember, that's the one thing you can do. You could just click right here off your student listings and be able to change anything you want at this point for your students. And remember, if it's a 100-day entity or if it's non-participation, and then also, like I said, those have to be, once you submit those have to go through approval processes. And if they're approved, if the non-participation is approved, it'll tell you what that non-participation you filled out. For example, if you filled out a medical, it'll say MED here in the column once it's approved. But if it still says pending, that means you're still waiting on us to approve that. And then a 100-day entity, once it's approved, it'll show what was the change from that, from what it was previously to what you changed it to. And so it'll change it to, once it's approved, if it gets approved, it'll make that changes right here underneath that 100-day. And like I said, testing school is the only one that you will not be able to click on and be able to change. Testing school has to be approved by OAA, and you have to send that to KD Assessment. All right, I think I've gone over all of these, the things on the student listings. And remember, you can filter by, like I said, specific one. If you just want to look at your post-secondary readiness for your 12th graders, you could see that on that particular student listing and be able to go each by test or individually, or you can see them all at one time and still filter them. So it's up to you how you want to look at this. And then, like I said, you'll click on when you're, for an example, I give you an example of how to do this. So if for this particular student, when you went to the, lunch update, to the free and reduced or our lunch status, for that student or paid status, and you're like, that's not right. That's not what it was, for the student. Remember, this has to be back. The demographics all have to be reflected as your first day of your 14-day test window, that you had back at rosters. So if that student's, so you'd find that student, click on the lunch status, and then you'd be able to do the drop down for lunch. And if this student should have been, free, then you would click, do the drop down, select free, and then you would update it. Now, once you click on this, of course, it's going to give you a note that says, OAA will check this information against what is in Infinite Campus. So you want to make sure that I see any changes you make to any of the demographic information on your student listings. First name, last name, SSID number, birth date, gender, ethnicity, lunch status, IEP status, EL status, all of that. If you make changes to that on the student listing, it'll always give you this particular note and say, go back and make sure that you've done it in IC, that it matches, because we will be checking that against when you put that information in. And then always when you update something, you always want to click on that update button to save it, so that and then when you refresh your screen for your student listings, you'll show that it has been updated. Now, how am I going to do it for my non-participations? Well, I've gone through, you know, you had to go to the forms page. If you've got to upload any medical non-participations in Sdrr, you have to go to the forms page first, make sure it's filled out completely, make sure all the signatures are on it, and then scan it to your computer. And then once it's there, you'll go to how to get to this screen is that you'll go back to your student listing, find the student on your student listing. You'll go over to the right hand, make sure you're in the right test for that student. And then you'll go over to the right hand side to where you see where the dash is underneath non-participation column. Double click on that. It gives you a drop down to be able to get to this particular. You'll select medical non-participation, and then voila, it comes up on this screen, and it'll have the student's name at the top. It'll have the test type that you're wanting to apply it. It'll have the grade level of that student, and it'll have the medical non-participation. Of course, you'll choose the file, and you'll what you'll want to do is click on choose file, find it on your computer where you've saved it, and then select that file. And then you'll want any information that you want to add from the school's perspective. You put it here in the box, and then you'll be able to update it. And you'll always want to make sure that you update. And remember, if you've got to upload more than the one file for that, you can click on upload more documents and be able to upload that as well in that particular piece. But like I said, you'll be able to browse, choose it, and then remember that the documentation always includes the non-participation form and the HIPAA form. And then you would click, after you've got it all done, you click update, and of course it'll go to us for us to be able to approve that particular non-participation. And once it's approved, it'll say on your student listing, you know, where you clicked on and it had a dash and there was nothing there except for the dash, it'll have MED for medical. And that means that that's been approved by us. If it still has, you know, and that's why I told you it's very important to look at your tickets, because sometimes we deny these medical non-participations. And somebody says too, well, oh my goodness, I upload the wrong form. What can I do? Well, you can go back and edit that and be able to upload, you know, more documents into it, and be able to choose that and upload the current one as well, to be able to, you know, if you uploaded the form, because sometimes we will, you know, send back more information and say this is not the correct form, you know, for medical. And so instead of having to go back and do a whole new ticket, you could just upload, you could just choose that, you know, and upload that again, the correct one for us. And that's what I was saying, you know, and then also, you know, here is, you know, for example, you did not, you know, you did not put in the right form that you were requesting, you know, was not valid. So here's how you could do it. You can click on that update and be able to choose the file and then upload that and submit that information to us. And you can also put additional information here too if you've uploaded a new form and you need, you know, provide us with more information on that. So that's why it's very important you look over this training, because it's going to assist you with how to do this. And like I said, any questions you have, you're more than welcome to call us, and we'll help you through it as well. Also, non-participations in Sdrr, we do have you know, what we call a non-participation called roster cleanup. Roster cleanup you only see during data review, so that's another difference. So then rosters for data review, you know, one of the changes I said you're going to be able to see is to be able to change your demographics right there on your student listings. That's a new change. And then also another change is roster cleanup. And that's one of those where addresses where the student appears on your student listing in error. And you were supposed to, maybe the student moved prior to your testing window and you, for example, left that student on the roster. Those students were not supposed to be on there. Remember, you're supposed to annotate and delete them off during the roster phase back in spring rosters in April and June. Well, one of the ways to clean that up is to click on roster cleanup and then explain why the student wasn't deleted from the spring rosters or why the student still appears on the student listing in error in that text box. So that's going to be an important thing you want to do. So you want to make sure that if you didn't clean it up back at rosters, that you clean it up now, and you've got that one that says roster cleanup. And here's what roster cleanup will look like. You will select that student. You know, you'll go to your student listing for that particular test. For example, this one shows you that this was for access. And it's a grade 4, and it'll have the student's name, and it'll have participation status, because remember, you have to double click on that non-participation. Underneath that non-participation, double click on that, and it gives you a drop down, and one of the drop downs, you know, where you chose medical on the previous screens to do a medical, then in that same drop down will also be roster cleanup. And so you would select roster cleanup, and then it will take you to this screen to where you would explain why was the student not deleted from the spring roster, or why the student appears on the student listing in error. You always want to, you know, put that information on there. And then you click update. And like I said, a note is we always go back to Infinite Campus. So any changes that you make during your student listings, also we will go back to Infinite Campus and make sure that it reflects it there. So it's always important that those two things match. And it always gives you a pop-up to let you know that, hey, look, oh, if you made a change, make sure IC shows that as well. And then click update. So that takes you through that particular non-participation, because that's something else that's different with data review than rosters. And then let's talk about your ticket listings. When you click on your ticket listings, you'll be able to see all of your tickets. You'll be able to update and view those to the left. And you can see all the information if you need to make changes to that student. You know, if you know any changes, you'll be able to see and be able to view. Once you submitted that ticket, you'll be able to see it and view it here on the updated and view ticket. It'll also tell you the test type. And this, for example, was KSA. And then the name of the student, who requested it, the requested entity, you know, in the district. It also tells you the ticket type that was requested and where it was requested, because remember for and if you're new, you won't remember this from spring rosters, is that for KSA and alternate KSA, you know, you could do those non-participations for that by content area. And that's only for those two assessments. KSA and alternate KSA, you can request a non-participation, like a medical non-participation, and it for that particular grade level, because you and then and by content. And then it'll also tell you the date it was submitted. It'll also tell you the updated date. And then the ticket status, whether this was new, and then, or whether it was, if you had to go back and do edits, or if it's not, if it's not approved yet, for non-participations or for accountability reasons, then it will also show you here on your ticket. It'll tell you the ticket status of that as well. And then sometimes people go through and they're going, oh my goodness, I put the wrong ticket for this kid. What can I do to get rid of that? Well, you can go in and close that ticket. If it's not the right information or the right student, you can go in and close that ticket at any time by clicking on that X from your student listings too. And then you can also do it from your ticket listing as well, be able to go in and close the ticket for a student. And like I said, you can filter by all of these. And remember, I did want to let you know that anytime you are filtering on the student listing or the ticket listing or the transfer listing, that once you filter, make sure to clear those filters so it takes it back to the original data. That's an important piece when you're filtering things. Always clear it and go, because some people call us and go, Chris, it's not showing me what it was before. And I always go, did you clear your filter after you filtered, by your students? And they'll be like, oh, no, I forgot that particular thing. So that's always an important thing. Non-participation test types. We've gone over non-participations, but I want to tell you that some differences. And here's two examples, because for KSA, here's the non-participations reasons I have. I have first year EL. Those are the students who participated, but they're not going to be part of accountability because they only had to take math and science for participation. So you always want to make sure those students are marked as first year EL on your KSA roster, even though they took the test for participation. You don't want their scores to be included in accountability. Then you have student was expelled without services. People get confused about this. Well, student was not expelled without services. So what do? Well, they were supposed to be tested at a neutral location. And then we have medical. And so medical is the one we've talked about a lot and how to do that one. You also see roster cleanup for KSA during data review, because I told you that was a new one that you'll see just during data review, is that roster cleanup. So if you didn't clean up a student, they were on your roster and they shouldn't have been on the roster. And we have students, for an example, back in the spring, a student who participated in, who participates in alternate assessment, alternate KSA, but they were on the KSA roster. Well, that means you had something back at rosters, there was something wrong in Infinite Campus that you didn't have that checked, in their IEP that they were that they participate in alternate assessment. And the same thing, for our students, who are ELs, who participate in that K2, you want to make sure that that is all, marked, or, that they participate in, a KSA if they're in grades, because, alternate KSA starts at grade 3, but for alternate access, it starts at K2. So there's some differences between our assessments. So it's very important to know those rules. Another thing is that, for an example, if that student, you didn't clean that student off of the KSA roster, because what you were supposed to do back then, if you had a kid who participated in alternate assessment, they should be on the KSA roster. alternate KSA roster and not on the KSA roster. So you were to go to the KSA roster back in roster phase in the spring and annotate and delete them off that and then add them to the alternate KSA roster. So, you know, you want to double check that and make sure those students were correct. And then any student that, if a student withdrew prior to your testing window and you didn't delete them off, you kept them on there, that would be what we call a roster cleanup. So you click on that roster cleanup. And remember, these are all, and then also student was withdrawn after the testing window began. That's a non-participation that you could have had for KSA. Now, when we get to we're going to look at a different one. We're going to look at the student. See, they're both grade 11 students, same name of the student, but one participated, in KSA, and another one that same student also participated in Access, for an example. Now, for this one, remember, let's look at the non-participations. Well, we still have the same, which is medical. We still have roster cleanup that shows up for that student, and we have the same that the student was withdrawn after the testing window began. And we also have the same one above that says student was expelled without services. But you'll notice some different changes for Access. We have initially fully English proficient, that is IFEP. That means that student on their screener exited. And that's for our grades, 1 through 12. That's that second semester grades 1 through 12 that they took the screener, and I was able, because that's not for kindergarten, because our kindergarten students can't exit off of the screener. They can only exit off of Access. Then we have another one that is different for Access that is not the same as KSA, and that's what we call Redesignated Fully English Proficient. That means RFEP. Those students they have exited off of a, either kindergarten, they scored the exit criteria of 4.5, and they should not be, they were previous year, was exited off and they were in monitor status. So, or it could have been in our students who are grades 1 through 12 and exited off a overall composite of 4.5 with a tier B/C. Or it could be our alternate access students, because remember the exit criteria for alternate access students is a P2. And so if those students exited off of, either access, alternate access, they would be what we call RFEP, and that means those kids should not have been on there. And that means not this year, that means previous years, and they're showing up still on your roster. They should not have been tested, and they had gained the exit criteria last year to exit. And so those kids should not be on there. And then we go in, now we're moving into cohort. Now this just talks about, the adjusted cohort graduation model provides, people forget this particular piece of cohort, that, it provides accurate graduation model that follows the student from their first year in high school through their expected cohort graduation school year. And remember, if they're on time, in their cohort, they'll be in that 4-year. And if they had to take an extra year, they'd be in that 5-year cohort. And then this also defines what 4-year is and how to calculate it. And this tells you 5-year and how to calculate that graduation rate. So we want you to remember, because people go, Chris, what what is this about cohort? Well, of course, they always follow that student from their first time they enter, whether it be, as their freshman year, or it may be after. We have students who weren't there freshman year, but then their first time they entered high school was their 10th grade year. So, so we always want you to make sure that it always follows their first year in high school, and through what their expected cohort graduation school year would be. Now, let's talk about some things with the cohort student listings. Of course, you have the enrollment changes. For example, G-codes should have been made back in Infinite Campus. Those were, there was the June deadline for your students who graduated, back in the spring, and then we had your ones who went to summer school, which was July 31st was the date, for you to go in and put in your G codes for those students to be reflected in your cohort student listings for this year. And then demographic changes should be made in Sdrr. Cohort does not follow our 100-day rules, because people get that confused with, when it comes to data review. And, usually our other assessments, follow that 100-day rule. Well, cohort does not. Cohort is one of those exceptions. It is where the student was last reported or they last graduated. So people forget that particular piece when it comes to cohort. Also, tickets to change reporting location for public reporting and non-participation requests can be in Sdrr. Will require you matching what is in IC enrollments before that can be approved. So that's why it's, if you go to make those non-participation requests for cohort, because that's one of the fields that you can do there for cohort in Sdrr, you have to make sure that it is also reflected in IC for that particular students, matches their IC enrollment, their records, those withdrawal codes and things like that. And then you're probably saying, well, Chris, when are we going to see our data for cohort when it was reflected in Sdrr in the last update? Well, you're going to see when it opens, on August the 11th, cohort will open just like with data review and for post-secondary readiness scores, that you're going to, that data had to be updated. It was last updated, so you had to make the changes, to that data for us to be able to see it, was August the 5th. And then anything you updated. Now for G codes, that was, July 31st, for the ones who attended summer school. Okay, and so that's why I said those are important dates, that, and that August 5th will also show you when you click on cohort to your student listings for cohort, you'll be able to see that the last date update that we got was August the 5th from Infinite Campus. Now, students, let's talk about, because this is one I was talking to you about on the previous screen about, where, the student is going to be accountable to. Of course, the student tracks back to the A1, the A5, or 86 school where the student was last primary enrolled for both in-person and virtual students, unless the student had a verified transfer or was a Kentucky Educational Collaborative for State Agency Children, which is KECSAC students. Then those students are going to track back where they were last primarily enrolled. Unless you've got a verified transfer of a student and that student was somewhere else besides that particular school. And that's why it's very important that, those withdrawal codes in Infinite Campus for cohort are completely filled out for students. we want to make sure that if there is a valid withdrawal for that student, if they, withdrew and went to another state, or that particular G code is in there particular for that student in Infinite Campus, and that it also reflects on the cohort student listing. And like I said, the only two exceptions are for if you've got a verified transfer that you filled out in Infinite Campus for the student, or if you've got a CEC student, then all of our, if it's not one of those, then the other students, they're going to track back to where they were primary enrolled. And, people get this confused, because that's always an important piece when it comes to accountability, is where they were primarily enrolled. We don't, look at, we don't test our secondary enrollment students. So we always test our primary enrolled students. And, if you didn't get a records request from a district and their last enrollment was with you, that's where that cohort's going to go. That student's going to come back to you. And so you want to make sure that you do have a withdrawal code. If a student had, you had a records request and that school, requested that, and there's a valid withdrawal code in Infinite Campus. And so you want to make sure that the primary enrollment, check those primary enrollments of your students. And also you want to make sure you look at those diploma types for your students, and look at their on-time status, whether they're on time, whether they, took additional time, that'll show on your cohort student listings. So you want to always look at those student listings, because that's going to affect your graduation rate coming up. That you will not see it during data review, but you will be able to see it soon for the next phase. And then when you click on cohort, when you log into Sdrr and you're looking at your cohort and you jump down to it, you're going to see the task list just like you did for data review. You'll be able to see that for cohort and be able to see, of course, this is optional to do the task list, but it does help you to know what you're supposed to be doing during this time. And that is, reviewing all of your different graphics. You want to make sure that you update the information in Infinite Campus and also in Sdrr if needed when demographics are updatable. And it'll let you know if it's updatable or not in for cohort. And then you always want to make sure you look at your withdrawal codes and make any changes, your end statuses, make sure those are correct in IC. End dates, make corrections to those. Also review, those students that are going to be accountable to you. If they're incorrect, you want to submit a ticket for that. Non-participations, if the student's in an incorrect cohort year or they're a verified transfer student, you would submit those tickets in Sdrr. You also want to look at your student listings and note any denied or updated tickets that you're waiting for us or we're waiting for you, that you get those tickets, done before data review closes on the 19th. Same for cohort. And at the end of cohort, make sure to save a copy of those cohort student listings. That's going to be very important. And then, like I said, I had to take a screenshot, so it's not going to show you, it shows you the next planned update, which is, of course, you would see here for cohort. I had to get a screenshot of this before it was updated on August, because we had to get training done for you, so before it opened. So this, always look here in red on the left hand side, because it tells you when it was last updated and when the next planned update. And like I said, the next planned update for cohort is August the 5th. And then It tells you, you know, what you need to be doing. This is your grade 12 students without G code and completed graduation tab and IC are set to not on time status. So you always want to make sure you look at your on time status students. On time, not on time, you know, because that's going to be important work of when you're looking at your cohort listings. And just like I said, you know, for data review underneath quick links, you'll be able to see when you go to cohort, you'll be able to see both student listings. If you click on the first one, it'll have 4-year and 5-year, or you can click on each individual 4-year and 5-year. And then your transfer listing, and remember your 4-year cohort is the 2022 4-year students, and then your 5-year cohorts are your 2021 5-year students. So remember those always, you know, for those particular students. So 4-year is current, 5-year is previous, who took 5 years to do to graduate. And then you'll have your transfer listings and then your downloads as well. And then it tells you your ticket information for a cohort as well. So that's important when you're looking at cohort. This goes over to cohort listing. And like I said, you know, there'll be fields where you'll be able to click on and update. And also, if you try to update something, it'll say Infinite Campus. You have to go back to Infinite Campus to do it for cohort. If it doesn't say that, then you're able to go through here, and if you double click on it, it'll be able to you know, let you do it here. But like I said, any changes you make here, you want to make sure to go back to Infinite Campus and make sure it's in there, just like data review. And you want to look at your end status, your diploma types, your end dates, whether your students are on time. Also, it gives you your ticket history too for your students, and you want to look at all the demographics for your students and check your accountability. And it always tells you, you know, you can, you know, double click on accountability and be able to change that here. File any non-participations, you can click on here and be able to do that. And then the others you have to go through and make sure that I see. But like I said, anytime you make changes, either in Sdrr or you have to make sure that it is reflected also in Infinite Campus. Cohort reminders. Review the last update of cohort like I showed you in red. When you click on cohort from IC, that will be August the 5th. Make changes in Infinite Campus. You would request verified transfers if necessary, and you know, accountability and non-participations can be done in Sdrr. And then there are going to be resources that I'm going to link to in this presentation to help you with cohort. Now, that'll come later on the presentation. Now, let's move into our last part, which is post-secondary readiness, and that is the academic readiness, because remember I said, you know, there are, for academic readiness, you'll be able to see all of your information about academic readiness in for your demographics for your students, and file non-participations and accountability changes. You'll go to data review and then click on post-secondary readiness and get to your student listings to make changes. If you've got to make changes to scores, you have to go to the one that says post-secondary readiness scores, and we're going to show that. So for academic readiness, these are the tests that show academic readiness for high school. So you have the ACT is one example, Coyote. You also have the KDE approved dual credit, SAT ALEX. ALEX is for mathematics only. Then you have the GED college readiness. You also have the transition attainment record, which is just for AKSA only. You have advanced placement exam, which is AP. International baccalaureate exams, which is IB, and then you have the Cambridge Advanced International Exam, CAI. And so Those will be the academic readiness, but the one that I do want to focus on that is TED specific, that you have to go back to TEDS for, is the approved dual credit courses, KDE approved dual credit courses. You won't see that in Sdrr because that has to go back, that has to be updated in TEDS, not in Sdrr. The rest of them can be updated in Sdrr. So that is one I wanted to point out to you on the screen. Now, you'll notice that I do kind of give you a resource. This is underneath the I Need Help button in Sdrr. You can see this particular thing. It'll say what the test is, if you want to know what tests they were, what office is responsible for this, post-secondary readiness resource for academic readiness. You will also see the benchmarks that the student had to make to be able to be academic readiness for post-secondary readiness, and then the range of scores that it ranged for that particular assessment, or if it's a letter grade. So this is underneath when you go to the I Need Help button. If you click on post-secondary readiness, you'll be able to get to this particular screen, the same thing I have here on the screen, this resource. Now, how can I go in and, I've looked at the demographics for the students on the student listing, underneath data review, and now I need, where do I go for scores? Well, I'm going to go to post-secondary readiness scores, because there were 3 tabs I told you. There was one for data review, there was one for cohort, and then there's another one when you get into Sdrr for post-secondary readiness scores. So this part is going to focus on the whether the student met the benchmarks. It'll show in Sdrr met benchmarks in the test that the student met for post-secondary readiness scores. If the student did not meet the benchmarks, then what you can do is you can click on that, and if you've got a place where the student did meet the benchmarks, you can upload a scanned copy, but it has to be an official score report from the vendor. And if it is approved, then you can locate this in the ticket place to be able to see whether that's when you upload that information. So you would go into the post-secondary readiness scores, and we'll show a screenshot of how to update that and also see this information. And I do have a note because, demographics and accountabilities for post-secondary are requested in the data review section of Sdrr, not in the post-readiness score section of Sdrr. I know that's just a little bit difference too. Now, here's when you go to the post-secondary readiness scores, and remember this is for academic only, not for career, because career is done in TEDS. So you can see the SSID number. You can filter by all of this from the student, from the student, find the student. You could be able to export it to an Excel or CVS file or PDF. In Sdrr, however way you want to look at it. Excel, a lot of people like Excel because they can manipulate it that way. But remember, anything, you can't make the changes when you export it out. You can only go into the actual student listing and make the changes. So when you go into the student listing and you find the student, you go, oh goodness, I have a student. You'll notice that the student did not meet the benchmarks, and see that one that says in progress. That means somebody has went in and has an official, and they scan the official report onto their computer, and then they would upload it here, because there's if you double click on that underneath that post-secondary readiness scores, you'll be able to double click on that and be able to change that to upload that score report, and it'll show in progress. If a student met it, it'll show that what it was. It was Coyote, for an example of this one student, their college readiness, in mathematics for Coyote math, and then benchmark that there was, and then it'll tell you that the student, the full name of the student, the SSID name of the student, and the date of birth, and then their accountable school. And so, like I said, if the student met it, it'll tell you what it met. If the student had not met the benchmarks, it'll say not met the benchmarks. And if you know that a student met the benchmarks, but it says the student did not meet the benchmarks, you have to have the official score report to be able to upload that, to be able to get that changed in Sdrr. And this is what happens when you get ready to, when you click on that to change, to update something. It'll have the student's name, their grade, which is 12, because remember, post-secondary readiness is for your, it's for grade 12 students. And their post-secondary readiness, it'll say post-secondary readiness. Of course, choose the test that, that what academic test that you're looking for, what was the subject, whether it was, English, reading, example, mathematics, whatever. And then you put in the score, and then you would say benchmark met. You would say yes. And remember when I told you that, you could see the benchmarks, for that, the screenshot, the resource for post-secondary readiness. You can also see it right here too by clicking. Instead of going to I need help, you can click here, and it has a list of the post-secondary readiness, and you can see, put in and say, yes, the student met the benchmarks, because you wouldn't put no. And then you would have to choose the file that was on your computer, upload it, and then once you've uploaded and got that in there, you want to click update. And then that will show in progress to us. And then that means we've got to go and look at that. If you just go in and put this information up here at the top and then do not have the official score report, we will have to deny that. Always it's an official score report from the vendor. Okay, so I think that takes care of post-secondary readiness and how to do it in both places. Now, I wanted to go over some resources for you for data review, because you have this I need help button, and that is going to help you with, if you need help with any of the individual assessments, it's here. Also, if you need it with just cohort, there's a whole lot of information, the withdrawal codes, everything is underneath cohort. If you're not for sure about those, you can find that underneath cohort. Also, post-secondary readiness that I just talked about, and how to change the post-secondary readiness scores. There's information on this. And then we do have the frequently asked questions. Also, we have, how to determine 100 days, the 100 days tools. We also have step-by-step instructions to help you of how to go in and change the 100-day entity, how to open up a ticket, how to edit a ticket, how to mark accommodations. And remember, you can't add students to post-secondary, to data review, because you can't add or delete students during data review. You can only go in and mark accommodations, change the 100-day, edit an open ticket, download or export, or file non-participations, etc. in Sdrr. So that's another change of data review too, is that you can't add or delete a student from data review. Now, what are some resources for you? course, first thing to help you with this, I want you to go to your WAPOC if you don't have permissions to Sdrr, or if you're a DAC, you don't have access to Sdrr or to the student data detail. You'd want to go back to your WAPOC. If your BACs do not have permissions to Sdrr, they need to also go to you, who would need to go to the WAPOC to get those to assist them. And remember, your BACs and others cannot see those spreadsheets. That's only for, they can't get to those spreadsheets to see those. Only you have those permissions to go underneath the applications login to get to that. Also, you want to review the Sdrr page. You want to also, because we do have a Sdrr page on the KDE website that this PowerPoint and video will be posted on for your reference, because that's going to be an important reference. You want to watch that before, you know, your data review comes open on the 11th. You want to make sure that before the 11th that you downloaded your student listings from your spring rosters. And remember how I said to go into Sdrr once you get logged in, and remember where I said it was closed? Go to that closed, and you can go back to the spring rosters, and even though you can't make changes to it, you can still download your student listings and your change listings and things like that that you made changes to for spring rosters, because that's going to be very important to double check to make sure that those are reflected in data review that were previously done in spring rosters. Also, you want to download, as a DAC, you want to download the spreadsheets from the web applications login, and I've linked it for you. I've also, if you need some help to 100-day, the anonymous quiz, remember that's anonymous. We're not going to go back and check those for you, but that just kind of tests your accountability knowledge. And remember, it's been 2019 since we last had accountability, so even if you know, if I've been around, you know, for a while, I think I'd still want to go in and look at these two tools for 100-day and a 100-day tool for you for data review. Because your 100-day tool is going to look at scenarios that you have for accountability and be able to, you know, see where those students would be accountable. It has different scenarios for you. And a lot of those are the scenarios you have in your district. But the quiz is just, you know, that's separate than the tool, and that's just to test your knowledge on 100 days. So, you know, go look at those scenarios, think you've got it, and then, you know, try to go in and look at that quiz and test your knowledge. And remember, that's anonymous. We don't ask you what your district is, you know, or who you are, but that's an important tool that you'll want to look at. Also, you know, I showed you on the screenshot underneath the I need help, that step-by-step instructions, you know, of how to go in and mark accommodations, because underneath that I need help, you could see the step-by-step instructions of how to go in and mark those accommodations if you need to, change the 100-day accountability, open up a ticket, download or export or request non-participations. There are step-by-step instructions underneath that I need help. And they're in Word documents. And you're probably saying, Chris, how do you know that? Well, because guess what I did? I went through and I took a screenshot of one of those. So I went to the I need help button, clicked on it in Sdrr, and for an example, you know, I wanted to see 100-day. How do I change my 100-day? Well, guess what? It tells you an example of how to do that. It'll say change 100-day when you click on it, and then it has the Word document. It has all the instructions, and then it even tells you that, you know, once you complete it on the student listing, it'll show in progress, and once you know, if you need to put more information, remember, as you've got tickets that are open, you know, that are in progress, you can go in and update those at any time. If you've got to add something to it, you can always do that. And you know, if it's approved, the new 100-day entity will show on the student listing. If it's denied, it will revert back to the previous 100-day entity, and it'll check and tell you to check the denied tickets and ask why, tell you why it was denied. So this is going to be an important thing for you. Another thing for you, not only the PowerPoint and the video you want to go through, but you also want to download, your rosters from the spring. And as a new person, you want to make sure that you've downloaded those. And even if you're not new, that if you forgot to download those, to go back to them and download those from the closed section for your rosters. But like I said, and if you need some help, it's the I Need Help button is going to be another important resource, along with the 100-day tool and quiz. And then we also have cohort resources, and I even linked to you what those will be. You have the cohort information, you have all the withdrawal codes, as well as the calculations underneath the I Need Help when you go to cohort. You also have the data review PowerPoint that you're looking at now, and the video to go back and look at cohort section, and you have a link to the cohort tool that takes you directly to that. I think I've given you a lot of resources to help you with your work, and you want to make sure that you do look over all of these resources too, and watch the video and have the PowerPoint ready to take notes if you need to on any of the things that I've talked about today. And then this just kind of goes over those resources for you and puts it all on one slide for you, just as a visual, of going to your WAPOC to get access to Sdrr, because OAA does not give you access to Sdrr. That's your WAPOC, that's your district technology person in your district. You have the I Need Help button that has lots of useful information. It's on every screen once you log into Sdrr. You have the recorded trainings that I just did here for you. You also have the accountability quiz and scenarios and accountability tool, and then you have that cohort tool. And then like I said, underneath that I Need Help button, if you forgot and you're like, now what did she say of how do I go and get those? Remember, go to those step-by-step instructions of how to, do accountability, how to, change it if you need to, how to do non-participation if needed, etc. And those are underneath that I Need Help button. Also, one other thing that we're going to give you to help you with a question, and we're going to do a question and answer session for data review. This will be a Teams meeting. So what you will do is, once you get into this answer session for data review, you can click on in here to join the meeting. If you're not able to join it, we're going to do this on August the 15th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Here you'll click on to get to the meeting. It's hyperlinked. Also, if you have to join, if you're not able to join us through the Teams meeting and you can only join by phone, you could do that as well, and it gives you the ID to be able to log, to answer, to get logged in just by phone. Keep in mind, just want to reiterate this particular thing, is that this is a question and answer session. This is not your training. Your training is this PowerPoint and video that you need to go back and watch. The question and answer session is that once you get it, once you get into it, and you may have, you want us to kind of walk through some of the functionalities of Sdrr, we can do that during this time. Any questions you have about, dates and things like that and what we're supposed to be doing in this time, you can ask that particular thing during the Q&A session. But this is not for specific student information, so you can't ask us. It's not a training. This Q&A session is not a training. So you have to watch the video and PowerPoint before you come. And it's not for specific student level information, because there will be other people on the call that will pop in and out, other districts, and we don't want specific student information to be on that. but we can show you some of the functionalities of how to get to your students. We can show that particular thing and how to do, once you get to the student listings, we can show you some screenshots and go through that process with you, and, changes to 100-day accountability, or how to get to the I need help button if you've forgotten from the video or the PowerPoint. And then here is our contact information for any questions that you have. Of course, you contact us for, anything, for on our division side of, for OAA, for the DAS division, that's the ones you usually communicate with. That's our DAC info box. If you have any questions, we'll be able to, you could submit questions that way. You can call us at our number here, and one of the consultants will be able to help assist you with any questions you have, and walk you through things as well. And then also, if you have other data issues or cohort issues, you want to submit those to the KD assessment side. That is our data division, and they'll be more than glad to answer any questions about, the spreadsheets, and then also any other questions, for cohort, etc. So this concludes our presentation for the fall reporting on data review. I know it's a lot of information, but I tried to pack a lot into this presentation for you, and also give you some useful resources. Also, those important dates you want to make sure you keep, and you can print any of these slides. Of course, you want to, and also go back to the video, and print out the PowerPoint to go with the video in case you want to take some notes as you're going through the presentation. And then also you can have, if you have, like I said, additional questions, you can feel free to contact our office, and also we'll have that data review Q&A session that'll come up on August the 15th. So look forward to assisting you with data review that's coming up with not only all of our assessments, but also cohort, and then also our post-secondary readiness scores. So I want to thank you all for all you do, and I do know it's a busy time for you, but keep in mind this is the last time that you can make individual changes to this information before it's publicly reported. So I want to thank you all for all you do, and I hope you all have a wonderful start to your school year, or if you're already in school, I wish you the best. Have a great day.